Hey, so I know you've been following the January 6 hearings.
All day, every day.
Well, you already know how I feel about these things. I think it's a distraction from bigger problems that affect the American people. And
Is
that's
the most important trial and hearings. And it's ironic that it's happened at the same time, 50 years after Watergate.
do you really think do you really think that uh, it's that big of a deal? Like tell me how where do you put it?
Absolutely.
Where do you put it up there in terms of this being a threat to our democracy?
Absolutely. I think we just ended up having a conversation about the election results in Colombia. And part of one of the reasons why Colombia has had a very violent history of liberals and conservatives actually killing each other, is because of disagreements
Mm-hmm.
around elections and political assassinations and things like that. So I know for a lot of folks who are worried about the US becoming a developing country because of immigration, it's actually not because of that, it's because there is a movement afoot to try to take away a lot of the institutions, a lot of the norms that actually give us the system that we have today, which is not perfect,
Mm-hmm.
full of issues. The A few powerful are still controlling a lot, but at least there is
We
a certainty that election results matter and that they need to be respected, and that the professionals who do the elections are doing so in a non-partisan way, and that the candidates need to accept the will of the people, regardless if they lose by however many points. They need to accept the fact that they lost, and that the winner becomes the elected official.
Right. So you want him to respect the process and follow the formalities, and so is that what is that where you have concern regarding this, or is it that you think that he had a an elaborate plan to create such a big protest and chaos and riots that it would actually overturn the election?
I mean, it's funny because sometimes I feel that some people think that Trump was the stupidest person or is the stupidest person ever, and some people think that he's the smartest mastermind that was able to come up with this plan. I think that the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think that he knew the power of his platform. He convened a rally on the day that the official certification of the election results, and then through these hearings, for those people who have been watching, they've been learning about. I mean, this was like months in the process, and you can. So I think you need to look back at the fact that one of the things that brought Trump to the scene was him challenging Obama's citizenship and saying that his birth certificate was fake, that he wasn't really born there, just to challenge
Mm-hmm.
the legitimacy of his election. And then, you know, the certificate, and everybody knew it was true. Those are facts. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's this whole thing about fake news. The media loved it, gave him the platform. So it's a pattern of him being able to use his platform
Mm-hmm.
and stick to his message to say, yes, that may be the truth, but I'm gonna say what is in my interest, and people are gonna believe me, or enough people are gonna believe me that is gonna make a difference. So I think, yes, we are facing a lot of important issues now: inflation, the war in Ukraine, etc., gun control,
Mm-hmm.
all those things. But I think at the heart of our democracy, or any democracy, is election are fair and open elections. And not only that, but also people accepting the results
Mm-hmm.
because they trust that the election professionals that carry those elections are telling the truth and are not biased for one candidate or another.
Right. So I think that's where you have to then ask yourself: is Trump the problem, or is he just the symptom? Then, right? Because
Well,
I mean,
go
we
ahead.
talk about stolen elections. Go back to 2000, George W. Bush with Al Gore. You talk about how Hillary Clinton used her power and her influence to essentially steal the primary from Bernie Sanders. So we've always had some level of election interference, some not so in the open ways of stealing elections, even the laws that the Republicans passed to try to disenfranchise voters. And so all those things have been happening for a long time. It's just is Trump just a byproduct of that, and he was just able to come in and tap into a vein where people already generally understood that there's a lot of corruption in the system, but he does it in such a crass way. He does it out in the open. He puts a bad name on the United States of America that people hate him for that because he's just foolish in that way. He doesn't strategize. He's not polite. He says whatever he wants. But again, I see him more
So
as a
he's
symptom.
American then. That's what
Well,
you're
I see
saying?
him more as a symptom of a lot of things that were already breaking down, right?
Yeah, maybe
And
so. And a lot of anger too.
yeah, and a lot of anger and frustration. And so, yeah, he is stoking the flames, but at the same time, I can understand how this does take it to a different level, to a dangerous level, in the sense that now he's a a president is challenging and encouraging protests to say that the election was stolen. So that is new. But to say that January 6th was the day that like America's democracy faced its greatest threat and things like that, like he had no support from the military. He had like I don't think I mean I'm on the camp that he's very opportunistic. Like he just does what he thinks will work without really thinking it through. He just rode the wave of populism, and he rode a wave of something that was already simmering below the surface. He didn't strategize very much. So same thing here with this January 6th thing. I mean, maybe he like talked to a few people, maybe he was trying to create protests, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, I mean, it was just a protest that turned into rioting. That hardly seems to me like it should be considered. Like I think some people at the time compared it to like America's second 9/11 or something like that, and I just thought that was like uh, exaggerated for the sake of generating attention and generating views.
Huh. Well, it's funny because in some ways it almost sounds like some of the excuses and some of the perspective of some of his supporters. I think when you realize that, and yes, maybe he was writing that wave of populism, but he directed it right to the Capitol, right as they were trying to complete one of the rituals of our democratic process.
Mm-hmm.
And those people inflicted a lot of pain on the police officers who were who were there. They destroyed property, government property. They could have, if they could have, they probably would have hurt elected officials, whether it was Pence, whether it was Pelosi, etc. So you can see how this could have escalated, or maybe Pence would have, instead of refusing to not go with the plan, if Pence would have gone along with the plan, what would have happened then? If you had a general too who decided to back, then what would happen then?
Mm-hmm.
And I think all those things that could have happened, obviously they didn't, but even the now let me backtrack. I mean, what could have happened would have been bad, but what actually happened was really bad in terms of the type of violence and desecration of things that for the most part we held dear, at least I feel, as American citizens.
Yeah,
And
but
then the other piece is now those same people who believe the lie, some of them are still in Congress. One of the things, and you're right, maybe it's not just a Trump thing, but like some of those folks are still in Congress, are are believe that nothing happened, saying that, oh, there's more important things that we should be thinking about. They're getting people elected who elected at state offices at the state level, at the level where people actually control the elections, where eventually, if it's not Trump, it could be a Trump-like candidate who can be in a position to really steal the election. And to your point, maybe steal it in a more public way that we're used to. And that, to me, would be a very problematic development in the American political history.
yeah, but I keep going back to Trump being the symptom of this because you have to remember that when he was elected, he was already doing all these saying these outrageous things, saying that Mexico doesn't send their best, they send rapists, and the things that he would say about women. Remember the just punch him in the face, and when there was a rally and somebody was protesting and they kicked him out, he encouraged the person to be beaten up. So this
Mm-hmm.
is the candidate that more than half of America elected. And so I think the deeper question is, how do you get someone like him elected in the first place? Because you could make the case that January 6th is just a natural progression
Yeah.
of a lot of the deterioration that has already been happening, and it's bubbling up to people already having lost a lot of confidence in this system, a lot of confidence that you still give it. So you still hold these institutions very high, but there's a lot of people that when they try to put things into perspective, they realize, well, it was all these politicians that went along with policies that shipped the jobs overseas for the last 20, 30 years. It's the Federal Reserve that has kept interest rates irresponsibly long for, since the 80s, really. Like every time there was a problem, they would just lower the interest rates. So that has decimated the middle class. Asset prices have skyrocketed. House prices are so high now that most people coming out of college can't afford to buy a home. And now with interest rates high and home prices up, it's even worse. So all of these policies, and again, these are our elected officials, and all of them following the nice formalities of every 4 years, a new party like the Democrats come into power, and then the Republicans. But behind the scenes, they've all sold out to like the pharmaceutical industry. They all push war. They all push for jobs being shipped overseas. They don't want to give people Medicare for all. So they've been gutting the country for so long, right? So then Trump is a symptom of all that. And unfortunately, January 6th was bound to happen, whether it was Trump or someone else. What's actually coming after this, if we don't course correct, if the politicians keep doing their legal, their formal corruption, the one that feels good, the one where you get to say, well, both parties are corrupt, but at least every 4 years they look each other in the eye, they shake hands, and they say, all right, it's your term to come to power. I don't agree with how you did it, but there you go. Ahí están las llaves. Go and do as you wish with this economy, right? So it's been such a gradual decline that what's gonna come after Gen 6 is going to be a lot worse. And I'm not saying that that I'm for that, that I'm cheering that on. I'm just saying that if I just look at this like a sober, realistic view, January 6th was just like a natural progression. It, from my point of view, all of the corruption, all of the bad things that you think it pointed out, like I was already seeing a lot of that, especially because I'm very critical of this country and how it um, policy, especially like foreign intervention in wars, etc. I've spoken about that. Trump just took it to the next level where he's just openly is openly saying what a lot of people already felt, and then but he is encouraging people to protest the elections, which is it is an escalation of that. But I mean, all these politicians want to pretend like January 6th and Trump was the problem, but that's not the problem. We're gonna get worse outcomes if things keep going the way they have been for the next 20 or 30 years. You're going to get a worse Trump, one that will this next time around will have the support of the military, one that will have the support of like other elected officials. Because and if they do get support of the military, then that's when you start getting uh, conflicts and clashes like in Latin America.
Yeah. So good points. And I think I just want to go back to the fact that a lot of the people involved in January 6th and that supporting Trump, yes, some of them were probably poor white workers and of other ethnicities, because I know there's at that rally I saw Asians for Trump, Latinos for
Mm-hmm.
Trump, Black African Americans for Trump, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But that crowd, there were also represented a lot of middle class folks, upper class folks,
Mm-hmm.
doctors, veterans, law enforcement folks. So it's not just people who were directly impacted by some of the policies that you mentioned, like right, like jobs going abroad and things like
No,
that.
but the
These,
middle class is affected too because all these doctors have their kids living in their basements. Right? So
that's true.
in one way or another, like the middle class is being gutted. Only the wealthy class is the one that's gotten richer, right? So, but
That's
yeah,
true.
but I get your point. I do think there's a lot of people that have this anger that and they don't know what to do with it, and they pick Trump as a savior when Trump is just a swindler. He just
Hmm.
wants to get ahead at somebody else's expense. So it's unfortunately that's the best that the Republicans could offer people. But I feel terrible for the people that like not just Latinos and blacks and anybody that looked to Trump and thought that he was going to be a cure for a lot of their ailments because he just wasn't. He continued a lot of the same policies really. I mean, he escalated tensions with Iran and he did other things. He's just very crude in the way that he does it. So yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you that this was something that I would have preferred. It didn't happen. It's January 6th. What are they calling it? A insurrection?
Hmm.
I call it more like a riot, protest turned violent, like a lot of protests. I mean, I wish it wouldn't have happened, but I get what I'm saying is that the 24/7 coverage of it for what 2 weeks now, um, no coverage of the print of inflation that was like 8.6 in May. No discussion of why we have that inflation. No discussion of what the Federal Reserve is going to have to do to bring down that inflation. The Federal Reserve is essentially going to try to crash the economy because that's the only way that they can lower inflation. That's going to cause millions of people to lose their jobs. I mean, housing is already cooling down. So it means banks are already laying off people, construction workers, construction is slowing down. So construction is going to slow down. And then what happens after a few months of that is people are no longer able, if they're unemployed, they can't pay their homes. So then they start losing their homes. So it's a downward spiral. But there's no discussion of that because why? Well, they'd rather distract people and make them think that January 6th was the biggest threat to their livelihood, when in reality, it's like everything else that's happening around them. So that's
Yeah, but that's the thing. So instead of So let's backtrack. So instead of Trump claiming that fraud had been committed, he could have been working with the Biden administration on the transition. He could have been doing things to try to prevent the war in Ukraine, right? He had
Yeah,
a good relationship with Russia. He could have maybe uh, been able to do that. He could have done a lot of things to maybe address some of the issues that needed to be addressed, but instead he decided to deny the results, and instead of what was doing the best for what the best thing for the country, he decided to do the best thing for him. And again,
exactly.
that's who he is. But that's my frustration because people say, yes, we're facing all these issues now, but the fact that we're facing a lot of these issues now is, I mean, not gonna lay it all on his on him in just a few weeks between the administrations. But there are things that he could have done, things that could have improved our ability as a country to face some of the issues that we face now. Who knows? Maybe not. Maybe even if he would have accepted the results and all of those, uh, everything would have happened like it happened with Bush and Obama. I mean, Obama still faced a terrible economic situation
Hmm.
and had to make some difficult decisions as well. I mean, maybe not none of those things could have been prevented, but the reality is, at least we wouldn't have been the for sure the Congress would not be having a hearing on that. Instead, they would have been focusing on those things too. So that's the thing, right? So
But do you think the Democrats feel the same way that you do? I think that they're probably thrilled that they get to have this hearing and point at the Republicans and say, because again, this is political theater, right? So they get to point at them and tell the people, look at how bad Trump is and his supporters. Don't vote for them, vote for us. But
no, I don't think so because this puts them in a difficult position. This puts you in the difficult position of you're doing you're doing these hearings. You took the time to go through to follow as much of it the legal process, right? To go through the courts to get people to subpoena, to present, to do all these things. So you did all of this to prepare for these hearings because you know it's important. And I'm sure the Democrats would much rather be able to be out there passing bills and saying, "Oh, we're investing here, we're lowering the tax, the gas tax." This is not something that they wanted to do. This is the right thing to do. You need to get I feel some closure instead of pretending like nothing happened. Like, oh, hey, my dad just beat my mom, but that was a year ago. I don't need to worry about that. Let's just move forward with what we're doing, right?
sure, I agree with that. But are these hearings actually trying to look at the underlying causes of this, or are they just trying to find people to put into the spotlight and blame as somehow having participated in this covert and align with Trump to somehow try to overthrow the election results?
Well, I think from my perspective, they're trying to get at the facts, present the facts to the American public. I think the Department of Justice is also doing investigations, and they are pursuing cases against everybody who was involved, included some of the extremist groups that were involved and were trying to take advantage of this
Mm-hmm.
of this chaos that happened on the 6th. I think they're probably, the Congress, the committee is not going to come to a conclusion. I think part of it is put it out there, put the information out, let reasonable people get the reasonable conclusions they want to get. Let the Department of Justice decide whether or not they're going to pursue charges, whether it's based on what actually happened, whether it's on the Trump organization raising $250 million for the legal defense, and not using it. Whatever they want to pursue. I think this is just an exercise of this is what happened. so that way we know what happened, and hopefully we the people who had some responsibility are held accountable, and hopefully we become better. Oh, you know what? Yes, this is a issue. This is a problem,
Do you
and
think,
let's.
sorry, do you think anyone's actually going to go to jail, especially an elected official, as a result of these hearings?
That's a good question. I don't know because and part of it, and referring back to the Watergate scandal, right? So Ford pardoned Nixon, and part of that was to reconcile and sort of have the country move forward. So maybe no one maybe a middle to high level person may go to jail, but whether Trump will go to jail, probably not. Highly unlikely,
Well,
given the
if
stakes.
my analysis of this from a cynical point of view is that they're all on the same team and this is just political theater, then I don't think anyone's really going to go to jail. Maybe a slap in the wrist, but we'll see. Uh, I don't disagree with you that he should have, going back to what you said earlier, that he should have devoted his time to trying to help the transition instead of being selfish and just thinking about himself. But I mean, this is Trump, right? You have to set the bar really low for that guy, and then he'll still disappoint you. Um, that's just and also to what you said earlier. Yeah, there are people that I do read on Twitter that they want to pretend like under Trump things were going well, and then under Biden things are worse, and it's because of Biden's fault. And it's like, well, can't really do much there if that's how they're going to analyze this situation, because it really it's been a downward trajectory, and it doesn't really matter Trump or Biden. We probably were going to end up in similar situations. So yeah, I think I'm comfortable with where we're leaving it at that. Anything else you want to add?
Ya se subió la presión.
Did I get you worked up talking about the?
Damn
I'm
URL.
not. I don't know if you get the impression that I'm trying to defend in any way Trump. I'm not defending the guy. I'm just trying to analyze this from a different perspective, a bigger, like, to me Trump is just like, he's just like a little pawn in a chessboard. He's not sitting as the king. Like, he's not in any of those prominent positions really. I mean, sure, he has some power as the president, and he might run again in 4 years, but he's just the president. He just comes in there and he does what the establishment wants him to do, right? So, and then he's gone in 4 years or 8 years, and he has some influence. Maybe they pay him a lot of money to do speeches. Maybe he writes a book. He gets wealthy off of it, which is what he wanted to do to begin with. I think his initial plan was just to run to raise his profile, and he figured that he was gonna lose, but he was gonna at least like be able to then ride that wave of his name recognition increasing to get some development deals or something. I don't think he actually expected to win.
And then when he lost, he couldn't let it go.
Yeah, exactly. When he lost, it hurt his ego, so he couldn't let it go. Yeah.
Bueno.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up there. If you all out there enjoy our content, make sure to check us out. We are Brown Perspective. Nos vemos.
Ciao.